The sudden death of Senator Lindsey Graham late Saturday night has created an unprecedented crisis in the Republican Senate, at a moment when the party can least afford it. Graham, who died at age 71 following what his office described as a brief and sudden illness, was not simply another senator. He was a critical link in a legislative chain that is now broken, leaving multiple major agenda items from the Trump administration teetering on the edge of failure. Graham had spent nearly a quarter century in the Senate. First elected in 2002, during Trump's first term, he chaired the Judiciary Committee and oversaw the confirmation of Justice Amy Coney Barrett and scores of federal judges. In recent years, he became Trump's closest ally in the Senate, a frequent golf companion essential to advancing the president's legislative agenda, and a vocal defense hawk. The timing of Graham's death could not be worse for the Republican Party. The Senate Republican caucus was already operating with a razor-thin margin. Senator Mitch McConnell, the former majority leader, has been hospitalized for an undisclosed health issue and has been missing votes for weeks. That absence alone reduced Republican working votes from 53 to 52. Now, with Graham's death, that number drops to 51 until Governor Henry McMaster appoints a temporary replacement. But the real problem extends far beyond simple arithmetic. Graham represented far more than a vote. He was a chairman, a strategist, a foreign policy voice, and a dealmaker who had spent decades building relationships across party lines and around the world. His absence means specific legislative priorities that were already struggling now face near-certain failure. Graham chaired the Senate Budget Committee, which manages budget reconciliation, a process allowing simple majority passage of major legislation. The Trump administration wants to use it for the Save America Act with voter ID requirements, which lacks the 60 votes needed under normal circumstances. Graham had met with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to structure a $350 billion military budget increase as part of the package. The next Budget Committee chair, likely Ron Johnson or Roger Marshall, would need time learning reconciliation procedures when time is running out before summer recess. But Graham's death has consequences far beyond the Budget Committee. He was a key member of the Senate Judiciary Committee holding confirmation hearings this week for Todd Blanche, Trump's nominee for permanent Attorney General. Blanche is controversial within his own party. Republican senators, including Bill Cassidy and Lisa Murkowski, have indicated they may withhold support if concerned about his independence or willingness to preserve Justice Department institutional independence. Graham was expected to use his influence to convince wavering Republicans to support Blanche. His personal relationship with Trump made him invaluable to the confirmation effort. Now that voice is gone at the precise moment when Blanche is most vulnerable. The Judiciary Committee Democrats will point to allegations in Senator Whitehouse's letter, Blanche's arrangement of preferential prison treatment for Ghislaine Maxwell, his firing of DOJ pardon attorney Liz Oyer for refusing political favors, and his negotiation of the anti-weaponization fund granting Trump and his family permanent immunity from IRS scrutiny. These allegations will be presented without one of Blanche's strongest advocates present to counter them. With Graham's death and McConnell's ongoing absence, Blanche's confirmation is no longer guaranteed. What Republicans expected to be routine has become deeply uncertain. Graham's death strikes a significant blow to the peace through strength wing of the Republican Party. Graham and McConnell have, over years and through multiple presidential administrations, maintained a consistent foreign policy hawkish stance. They have advocated for strong defense spending, support for traditional alliances, and a robust American presence on the international stage. Graham had just returned from Ukraine, where he met with President Volodymyr Zelensky and announced an agreement with the White House that the Senate would move forward with a package imposing sanctions on Russia for its aggression against Ukraine. That agreement is now in limbo. Graham was expected to be the champion of those sanctions, using his credibility with Trump to ensure they move forward. With his death, there is no clear advocate for the sanctions package at a moment when the window for action is closing. The Republican caucus is increasingly dominated by an isolationist wing that questions whether the United States should be involved in overseas conflicts or should maintain the defense spending commitments that traditional hawks have long advocated. The Senate schedule for July reflects the scale of the challenge. Lawmakers were already planning to navigate difficult legislative terrain: the defense authorization bill, the budget reconciliation package, and Blanche's confirmation hearing. All of these items were already facing difficult odds before Graham's death. Now, with Graham gone and McConnell absent, those odds have become significantly steeper. Senate Majority Leader John Thune will need to make immediate decisions about succession. A new chair for the Budget Committee must be selected. New committee leadership must be assigned to manage the complex work ahead. The Judiciary Committee will need to proceed with Blanche's hearing and vote without one of his key advocates. The defense spending package that Trump has requested must navigate a Senate where the most vociferous advocates for military investment have been silenced or sidelined. Governor McMaster will appoint a temporary replacement immediately. South Carolina law requires a special primary by August 11th, with possible runoff by August 25th. The winner faces Democrat Annie Andrews in November. Possible candidates include Representative Nancy Mace and Lieutenant Governor Pamela Yvette, neither of whom has Graham's legislative experience or national standing. What makes this moment uniquely difficult is the compound effect of multiple crises. McConnell's absence removed one voice. Graham's death removes another. The Republican Senate now faces a narrow margin, a complex legislative calendar, controversial nominees like Blanche, and major agenda items lacking the 60 votes needed for passage. Budget reconciliation requires expertise and procedural knowledge that Graham possessed, but his death now removes from the equation. Blanche's confirmation hearing is scheduled for this week. The Save America Act remains without the 60 votes needed under normal rules. Reconciliation was supposed to solve that problem, but it requires Budget Committee leadership and expert strategy. Graham was working on that strategy. Now someone else must do it quickly. The Trump administration has requested additional defense funding for the Iran conflict. Graham would have been an outspoken advocate. His death removes that advocate from the equation. The Senate will meet this week. The Judiciary Committee will convene for Blanche's hearing. The Budget Committee will need new leadership. Graham's death has not changed the overall balance of power. Republicans still hold a 53-47 advantage after McMaster's appointment. But Graham was more than a vote. He was a voice that commanded respect, understood procedural mechanisms, and had relationships with international leaders. His absence leaves a vacuum in Republican leadership at the moment it is most critical. The confirmation of Todd Blanche, the advancement of voter ID legislation, the provision of additional defense spending, the imposition of sanctions on Russia, and the passage of a complex budget reconciliation package. All of these items now face an uncertain path forward. The Republican Party now faces a leadership crisis that extends far beyond the simple arithmetic of votes on the floor. It faces a crisis in the procedural knowledge and political relationships necessary to advance its agenda in a closely divided chamber. Graham's expertise in navigating Senate rules, his relationships with fellow senators and international leaders, and his credibility with Trump cannot be easily replaced. An interim appointee may restore the seat, but cannot restore the institutional memory and influence that Graham brought to his committee positions. Graham's death, coming at this particular moment in the legislative calendar, with the Senate scheduled to work through July before summer recess, with multiple controversial nominees requiring confirmation, with a narrow Republican margin already stressed by McConnell's absence, represents a fundamental disruption to Republican plans for the summer legislative session. The consequences will unfold over the coming weeks and months as senators attempt to navigate a Senate that has suddenly become significantly more difficult to lead.